15, it's best not to eat any of these. And why? Because mercury pollution. Pollution is so widespread and ubiquitous that there are literally hundreds of water bodies in New York State that have been identified as being, quote, impaired under the Clean Water Act. So what's happening? What's the result of all this? Well, the result of this is that we have generations of kids who are growing up thinking that this is normal. Nobody remembers when you could go out and eat fish without worrying about contamination. Nobody remembers when you could go on to any beach on Long Island and eat the shellfish. Nobody remembers when you could drink water anywhere in the state and not be worried about chemical contamination or sewage contamination. And the fact is, the further that we get away from that time, the more removed we become from the reality of what a quality environment really is. And the scary thing is that you do have generations who are growing up in an environment where fish advisories, health advisories, closed areas, hazardous waste dumps are all sort of part of the normal picture of, this is where we live. Well, what this does is it really skews our whole frame of reference. And I think Onondaga Lake is a great example, because I have heard this remedy referred to by regulatory agencies, by academics, by other folks involved as a cleanup. The idea that anyone could think that going to this lake and removing a tiny, minor fraction of the amount of pollution that is in that lake and putting a cap over it that is certain to eventually fail and calling that a cleanup is a real symptom, in my view, of how our frame of reference has been skewed, to be able to call that a cleanup. And I think what's really probably the most troubling part of what is being proposed out there is that you can read the record of decision and the supporting documents, and you can look and you will not find what the goal of this supposed cleanup is. It does not say we want to be able to eat the fish from Onondaga Lake by such and such a date. It does not say we want to be able to swim in Onondaga Lake by such and such a date. You will search in vain for any reference to those goals. And because there are no goals set forth, there is no way to measure the success or failure of what they are planning to do in Onondaga Lake. The nation and its consultants have repeatedly asked, to no avail, how are you going to figure out whether this remedy works or not? How do you know if it's working? What are you going to be measuring? Do you have a target? Do you want the contamination in the fish to reach a certain level before you can say it's a success? Those questions go unanswered. The fact of the matter is that there are no goals, and there is therefore no yardstick by which to measure whether what they're planning to do is going to be a, quote, success or a failure. Well, what can we do? We can stand up and be heard. We can refuse to settle for these so-called remedies that dump these problems in the laps of our children and grandchildren. We can tell politicians and the regulators that we're not going to settle, that we can and we must do better. We can clean up Onondaga Lake. It takes political will, and it's going to take a lot of money. But think about how much money Honeywell made by being able to dump its industrial waste for all those years without having to have it treated or taken to a depository where it would be isolated from the environment. In short, we need to change the terms of the debate. We need to demand a cleanup, not a cover-up. And as Sid Hill, the Tadadaho spiritual leader of the Haudenosaunee, said in one of the meetings with DEC and EPA, he put it so simply. He said, we want to be able to eat the fish. We want to be able to drink the water. To settle for less, I submit, would be to surrender our responsibilities to future generations. Thank you very much.